before the playoff wins, before Josh Allen, the Bills had this. So how did the Bills go from one of the most mediocre teams in the NFL to one of the best? This is Timeline. So the Bills were incredibly mediocre, and for 12 consecutive years they missed the playoffs with mostly losing records, leading to January 6, 2013 when the Bills decided to fire head coach Chan Gailey and instead hire Syracuse coach Doug Marrone. The Bills' next big play was drafting their new quarterback EJ Manuel in the first round of the draft.
Buffalo Bills select EJ Manuel.
Wow!
Florida State.
Wow!
The 6'4", 240-pound QB was an incredibly imposing dual-threat player, but still incredibly raw. But with the loss of last year's starter Ryan Fitzpatrick, EJ Manuel would immediately be put in charge of leading the offensive unit. In addition to a new quarterback, the Bills also made huge upgrades to the receiving core, with both Robert Woods and Marquise Goodwin, both of whom had showed flashes of potential but were also incredibly inconsistent. The rest of the Bills' offense was pretty mediocre, with an average offensive line and receiving core. Defensively, the Bills were looking much more solid than last year, with the incredible Mario Williams fully recovered from his wrist injury, joining both Marcel Darius and Kyle Williams up front, along with safety Jairus Byrd and the emerging Stephon Gilmore. Overall, the team's future was bright, but this season was much more of a first step towards a rebuild rather than an all-out winning season. And the Bills had a tough start to the season, going 2-4 with 5 of those games being decided by only one possession. Their biggest blow came in Week 5 when EJ Manuel sprained his knee, causing him to miss the next 5 games. After his return, the Bills did manage to win 3 more games, but missed the playoffs with a 6-10 record.
Stop him and win the game. Here's Manuel with a fade and wide open. Touchdown to Stevie Johnson.
After a rough rookie year, many analysts were unsure about EJ Manuel, but head coach Doug Marrone was still all in on the young quarterback, trading away next year's pick to draft the electric Sammy Watkins, the 4th pick, giving him yet another receiver. With the Sammy Watkins pick, the Bills looked slightly better, but still had a pretty bad offensive line, and overall, the entire offense depended on EJ Manuel's ability to make the next step. Defensively, the Bills were missing a couple key pieces after losing Jairus Byrd in free agency and Kiko Alonso to injury, but their defensive line still looked terrifying and looked like they could hold the rest of the unit together to hopefully have a much better season. And coming into the 2014 season, the Bills managed to win their first 2 games, including a huge win against the rival Dolphins. But they struggled in their next 2 games with losses to the Chargers and Texans, where Manuel struggled to get the offense moving, throwing for 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions with a 53% completion rate. Following this poor performance, Marrone decided to bench Manuel and instead start backup Kyle Orton. Behind Orton, the Bills team managed to find his groove, going 3-1 heading into their bye week. The Bills continued to play well in the second half of the season, until a brutal Week 16 loss to the Raiders eliminated them from playoff contention.
Into the winds, Thigpen comes up the 25 to take it. Thigpen's got a hole. Thigpen down the sideline. Thigpen cuts it back to the end zone, touchdown. Rodgers has it stripped. Ball is loose in the end zone. Lacy picks it up. And they're
Despite the disappointing end to the season, the Bills managed to finish with a 9-7 record, their first winning record since 2004, and the defense ended with a league-best 54 quarterback sacks. Despite the Bills' promising season, head coach Doug Marrone decided to jump ship at the end of the season, using a contract loophole stemming from the death of the old Bills owner. Players and staff were both incredibly hurt and disappointed by how brashly he left the team, forcing the Bills to hire new head coach Rex Ryan to replace him. But the Bills had bigger issues. Incumbent starter Kyle Orton had just retired, forcing the Bills into signing both Matt Castle and Tyrod Taylor as potential replacements, in addition to still having EJ Manuel, leading to a pretty average QB competition where Tyrod Taylor beat up both Matt Castle and Manuel to take the starting role. Aside from the quarterback situation, the Bills made a blockbuster move, adding superstar running back LaShawn McCoy. In addition to McCoy, the Bills also signed Charles Clay to work alongside Robert Woods and Sammy Watkins to create a dynamic offense. On the defensive end, the Bills had little to worry about, as their 2014 defense was one of the most dominant in the league, allowing only 18.1 points per game. But the Bills decided to make a small improvement to their secondary by adding corner Ronald Darby to work alongside Gilmore. Overall, it seemed like the entire Bills team was at a playoff contending level except the quarterback spot, and the Bills desperately needed someone to step up in order to win some games. And before the 2015 season, head coach Rex Ryan predicted a playoff run, and the first few games the Bills team looked incredibly promising, winning 2 of their first 3 games in dominant victories over the Colts and Dolphins. However, this excitement would be short-lived as the Bills began to struggle, going 1-3 heading into their bye week, before losing tough games against the Patriots, Chiefs, Eagles, and Redskins to once again miss the playoffs. The biggest surprise of the season came from Tyrod Taylor's strong performance, surpassing all expectations and becoming a solid quarterback that the Bills needed. However, the Bills' powerful defense regressed under Rex Ryan this year, falling from 4th in the league to 15th. But still, the Bills had a lot to be happy about with this season.
21-13 in the third quarter. Tyrod going back to Sammy. Got it.
In order for you to get those deep completions, like
Hopkins goes in motion. Fitzpatrick unloads. Intercepted.
For the first time in years, the Bills entered the offseason with a decent quarterback. Tyrod Taylor, along with Sammy Watkins and LaShawn McCoy, was an incredibly promising offense. The Bills did have some problems though, with both Robert Woods and Charles Clay underperforming last season, but these concerns took a complete back seat to addressing the rapidly declining Bills defense, whose blame was placed on both Rex Ryan's system and general age. Both Mario Williams and Nigel Bradham made it clear that Rex Ryan's system wasn't for them, causing them both to be dropped during the offseason. To address this hole, the Bills drafted Shaq Lawson and Reggie Ragland in an attempt to repair the Bills' defense, as well as signing both Lorenzo Alexander and Zach Brown. Despite their problems, expectations were high for the new Bills, and many believed they could even steal the division title from the weaker Patriots and make a deep playoff run. But entering the season, the Bills struggled with 2 opening losses whose blame was somewhat inexplicably placed on offensive coordinator Greg Roman, who was promptly fired and replaced with a more run-heavy Anthony Lynn. With Lynn at the wheel, the Bills managed to improve with 4 straight dominant victories over tough opponents. But then the Bills began to decay, as Sammy Watkins, LaShawn McCoy, Robert Woods, Robert Salas, and Walt Powell all suffered injuries in the following weeks, causing the Bills to go 3-7, failing to qualify for the playoffs for the 17th straight season, the longest active drought of all 4 American sports leagues.
Taylor has time, going for it all to the end zone, and it is caught. Sammy Watkins, touchdown.
Fake it. And Brissett in trouble on first down. He is brought down.
In the aftermath of another failed season, the Bills decided to fire Rex Ryan and instead hired the incredible defensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers, Sean McDermott, in his place, their 4th head coach in 5 years. So coming into the next season, the Bills had a ton of problems that needed to be addressed. Firstly, after losing Stephon Gilmore, the Bills needed another corner to bolster their secondary, leading them to drafting Tre'Davious White in the first round. Another problem area was the receiving corps. Sammy Watkins had missed 11 games in the last 2 seasons alone and was injured heading into the offseason. Plus, Marquise Goodwin had just left the team during free agency. The Bills attempted to address this by using their 37th pick on wide receiver Zay Jones. The Bills also needed to replace their weak safeties, leading them into signing both Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. At the time, this Bills team was seen as very weak, with its mediocre receivers and offensive line, plus yet another system to work under. It seemed that the Bills were destined for another few years of misery. On the other side of the ball, analysts were even more critical, seeing the Poyer-Hyde safety duo as much weaker than other teams, and predicting that the Bills would struggle to defend the pass and have one of the worst records in recent history. But this season, it became clear the Bills had something they had been missing in previous years. Clear, stable leadership, plus an incredible draft class and free agency signings, leading the Bills into starting the season a hot 5-3. However, the Bills season did get thrown into a loop heading into Week 10 when the Bills faced the Saints. Heading into the fourth quarter, the Bills had only gotten 5 first downs the entire game and were down 37-3 before Tyrod Taylor was replaced by Nathan Peterman. In the following week, the Bills decided to make an incredibly controversial move, benching Tyrod Taylor and starting Nathan Peterman. This was seen as surprising as Tyrod Taylor had led the Bills to a 5-3 record until last week's loss, and it was not entirely his fault that the defense had let up 296 rushing yards. And this move completely backfired as Nathan Peterman had one of the worst NFL starts ever, going 6 of 14 for 66 yards with 5 interceptions at halftime, leading him to be benched, and for the rest of the season, the slightly disgruntled Tyrod Taylor led the Bills' offense.
Rolling and throwing off the hands of DeMarco and intercepted. Patrick DeMarco couldn't hold the rookie, and they do. He floats one, and that's intercepted. Pressure coming. Peterman hit, and that is his third interception of the day. Pass is that almost? Did he pick that off? That gain good for 19 yards. And that's the 5th interception today.
And back with Tyrod Taylor, the Bills won huge games against the Chiefs, Colts, and Dolphins to end the longest playoff drought and qualify for the wild card. And in the wild card, despite taking a 3-0 lead before halftime, the Jags would rally for the victory in a hard-fought defensive battle, sealing their victory with an interception by Jalen Ramsey on the Bills' final drive.
Peterman from the gun. Here we go. Pass, tip, and intercepted by Ramsey to close it out. Taylor to throw to the end zone for Tate. He's got it in the back of the end zone. Touchdown, Bills.
3rd and 7. Pass intercepted. Jumping the route was Poyer, and Poyer's got a pick 6.
So coming into the next offseason, the Bills finally decided to cut ties with Taylor and decided to trade up twice in the draft from 21st to 12th to the 7th pick to pick up quarterback Josh Allen.
With the 7th pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the Buffalo Bills select Josh Allen, quarterback.
But the Bills were still in no position to make a playoff run, as during the offseason they lost offensive linemen Cordy Glenn, Richie Incognito, and Eric Wood, leaving them with one of the worst blocking units in the entire NFL. On top of that, they had incredibly mediocre receivers, leaving the offensive unit in complete shambles. But defensively, the Bills were looking incredibly solid. Despite analysts hating on them just the season before, the Bills had an incredibly dominant trio in Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer, while also drafting the athletic Tremaine Edmunds in the first round, making them a terrifying defense. But coming into the 2018 season, the Bills had a rough start with 2 embarrassing losses to both the Ravens and Packers, as Josh Allen and Nathan Peterman struggled to get the offense going. In fact, in the first half of the season, the Bills scored 6 or less points 4 times. Defensively, however, the Bills were still incredibly solid, ranking 2nd against the pass and 14th against the run. But it wasn't enough as the Bills finished with a 6-10 record, failing to qualify for the playoffs.
To go out there by himself. Allen on 1st and 10, under heavy pressure, and throws, has his man, it's Foster, and he's into the end zone for the touchdown. To go out.
Tannehill on the move, and it's intercepted again. 2nd pick for the Buffalo defense, and it's Trey White.
Last season, it was clear that the weakest point of the Bills was their offense, so they decided to remake practically their entire offense, firstly adding John Brown and Cole Beasley as more reliable receivers, plus using their 3rd round pick on the athletic tight end Dawson Knox, and drafting running back Devin Singletary to replace the EJ Manuel, while also overhauling their offensive line, adding 4 starters, signing Quinton Spain, Mitch Morse, John Feliciano, and drafting Cody Ford with the 38th pick. Defensively, the Bills continued to improve, adding defensive tackle Ed Oliver with their 9th pick. But other than that, the Bills didn't change much on their defense. And coming into the 2019 season, everything was working right, as the defense picked up right where they left off with dominant performances every week. On top of that, the offense was now performing much better behind an improved Josh Allen as they started to close out games. Overall, by the end of the season, the Bills' defense ranked 2nd in points allowed, and their offense didn't have a single game below 10 points compared to last season's 5, leading them to a 10-6 record for a wildcard spot. And in the wildcard, the Bills started off strong, going up 16 on the Texans, but unfortunately burned out at the end as the Texans forced OT and won 22-19 to eliminate the Bills from the playoffs.
The outside, and he is dead to right. But the guy that Dabo Swinney said was the closest thing he's seen to Michael Jordan. He put the Oh, but I'm guessing 2nd and 13 out, deep drop hit as he throws it downfield for Brown. Who's got it? John Brown breaks free and scores.
So plenty of clock, not an issue at the moment. With over 10 minutes left, Mario set. First time they've got.
Last season, the Bills were incredible, but it was clear that their biggest issue was the lack of a go-to receiver, which especially hurt them in their playoff loss to the Texans. So during the offseason, the Bills decided to make a splash and trade away their 1st round pick for superstar Stephon Diggs to get a true number 1 option offensively. Other than that, they made slight changes to their offense, adding both Brian Winters and Darrell Williams to their offensive line, and drafting Gabriel Davis as a steal in the 3rd round. Defensively, the Bills continued to add depth, adding Quinton Jefferson, Josh Norman, AJ Klein, Mario Addison, and drafting tackle AJ Epinesa with their 22nd pick, keeping their incredible secondary and pass rushers. And in the 2020 season, there was not much the Bills could do wrong, as Josh Allen made a huge leap offensively, propelling himself into an MVP candidate, with Stephon Diggs being exactly what was needed to completely unlock the Bills' offense. The Bills did struggle to contain both Derrick Henry and Patrick Mahomes in tough Week 5 and 6 losses, but dominated as underdogs against tough teams and got insanely hot to end the season with a 13-3 record to win their division and qualify for the playoffs. In the wildcard against the Colts, the Bills were able to recover from previous mistakes, refusing to allow the Colts to mount a complete comeback and winning 27-24 for the Bills' first playoff win in 26 years.
Hold on. Rivers airs it out. It is knocked away, and it's over. It took a quarter of a century, and the Buffalo Bills have won a playoff game.
And in the divisional against the Ravens, the Bills completely dominated, and after returning a 101-yard interception plus Lamar Jackson's injury, the Bills cruised to a 17-3 victory.
Stays in the block. Jackson fires, and that will be intercepted in the end zone by Johnson. Taron Johnson, and only Jackson can stop him now. Too late to the end zone. Touchdown.
In the AFC Championship against the Chiefs, the Bills took an early 9-0 lead, but their offense was completely ineffective in the red zone, and on defense they were unable to contain the Chiefs' offense, giving up 3 consecutive touchdowns in the second quarter. The Chiefs' momentum carried into the second half with 3 more scoring drives, and the Bills did mount a small comeback, but they were unable to catch up and lost to the Chiefs 38-24, ending an incredible season.
It's going to be a glorious run for the Bills coming up. We're going to see them, I have no doubt, in this spot.
They'll be back next year.
As he charged the football loose, gets it back to Josh Allen. They'll try to build on a 7-point lead. Allen taking a shot. Up in the air, it is caught. Allen dropping it down.
Arnold chased out again, rolling left, throws across his body, middle of the field, and it's no call yet. Is it intercepted? Matt Milano is there.
Last season, Josh Allen became every NFL franchise's dream QB. After a weak rookie year and a mediocre sophomore one, Josh Allen became extremely dominant in his third year, becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the league and creating a perfect connection with receiver Stephon Diggs. So offensively, little was changed except adding another receiver in Emmanuel Sanders and drafting rookie Spencer Brown. But their biggest problem last season was generating pressure on their quarterback, probably the biggest reason they struggled against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So the Bills decided to use both their first and second round picks on defensive linemen Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham to hopefully bolster that side of their defense. But other than that, the Bills ran a similar lineup as last year to enter the season. And in the 2021 NFL season, the Bills were equally, if not better, on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, with the #1 defense in the league as well as the highest average margin of victory. However, the Bills, unlike last year, struggled to win their close games, dropping all their close games in ugly losses to the Steelers, Titans, Jaguars, Colts, Patriots, and Bucks, ending with an 11-6 record, qualifying for the wild card once again. And in the wild card, they absolutely dominated the Patriots, becoming the first NFL team to score a touchdown on every offensive drive, as their defense held the Patriots to 17 points, finishing the game 47-17 to advance to a divisional rematch against the Chiefs.
The Buffalo Bills stampede into the divisional round.
And the divisional was a back and forth battle and one of the best games of all time, with 25 points scored in the final 2 minutes. But after an incredible drive by Josh Allen, the Chiefs sent the game to overtime, where they scored a touchdown and the Bills weren't allowed to answer back, ending their season.
Allen fires it into wide open! Remarkable! Touchdown! Down the middle. It's Hill in the open. Cuts it upfield. He might be gone. He is! Kansas City! Down the middle to the end zone. And there it is!
Throw it right away, right now to someone in the middle.
Down the middle. Oh my goodness! It's going to be a 48-yard attempt. Hundreds of thousands around the planet. The kick is good! Looking to the end zone for the win! He caught it! Ball game!
1 foot's down. You can see the strength of Allen to get rid of this ball.
One foot is that back foot dragging when he makes the catch. The officials on the field.
Here, with still plenty of time left. White's going to take a shot, puts his back into it, and that ball is picked.
Coming into the next season, it was clear that the Bills didn't need any radical changes to win a Super Bowl, but slight adjustments, starting with their offensive guards who struggled last year, leading them into signing both Roger Saffold and backup David Quessenberry to help the offensive line. Defensively, they made a huge addition, adding Von Miller to their already league-best rushing unit. They also made an adjustment to their secondary, drafting Kaiir Elam in the first round to help fill the hole created by Levi Wallace's departure. And once again this season, the Bills have been incredible, easily beating tough teams to emerge as a Super Bowl favorite. The Bills did suffer a huge loss with the terrifying injury of Damar Hamlin, their backup safety, but as I'm making this video, Hamlin is doing much better, and got to watch as the Bills won their final game of the season, ending with a 13-3 record. So heading into the playoffs, the Bills are set to play against the Dolphins in the wild card. And given their current roster, my prediction is we'll see the Bills go all the way to the Super Bowl. Let me know if you guys agree with my prediction and what team you want to see next. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.